Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea, and I'm a developer. And one of the things that I do is I do a bunch of different stuff. But the common thing among all of it is that I look at the tech world from the perspective of a system administrator. And whether it's in writing code or writing documentation or fixing bugs or fixing support tickets, a lot of my career has been in making sure that the people who keep the server-side stuff running can do that. So that's actually kind of fun. I like it a lot. So old school ops is definitely not dead. What I'd like to share today is what happens in that land of ops and how it intersects with our roles as writers. A lot has changed since my days of the 12-hour midnight shift. The original DevOps was making devs sit in the NOC with the ops people so that we could teach them how to run this nifty thing that we made. But these days, underneath all those happy little clouds that enable our online lives, there's still a few actual physical computers. Somebody has to install them, somebody has to maintain them. They go down. Somebody gets a notification, and somebody decides when it's time to send a request to the data center to have a tech push a button. So lots of developers sign up for things. Things are fun. Managed infrastructure services are really, really great because running this stuff is not easy. Keeping this stuff secure is really not easy. And offloading it on somebody else can really help you focus on your own business, and I'm sure you've read lots of marketing material that wants to inform you of that. The rise of everything as a service has certainly changed what many sysadmins do on a daily basis. It's shifted from running cable, pushing around the crash cart, to doing more integration and automation. There's code to be written, even if no end user is ever gonna even know it's there, much less see it. DevOps in many ways exist because engineering and operations need to understand the world each side lives in. So old school ops has definitely not gone away. It's in banks, brick and mortar retail, transportation, lots of organizations that comprise a great part of the economy. Many have shifted to new ways of managing technology. A project that 15 years ago would be deployed in a company data center might now use however many AWS instances demand requires. And then there are other things that never will. Government labs, three-letter agencies, stuff like that. So, how do you actually learn this stuff? It isn't a career path that historically you get into by sitting in a classroom. There's a lot of tribal knowledge. It's passed from elder to younger, through examples, through observation, and the trial by fire known as on-call. The weekend you spent with two senior colleagues, TCP dump, and the pizza delivery guy is a stronger professional bonding activity than any 10 evenings in the pub. Organizations using applications they didn't build have to rely heavily on documentation, whether from an external vendor or written in-house. Vendor documentation, what the maker of the software thinks will be most helpful to the largest number of people, is hopefully good at answering how. It might not be the best at answering why for you. But surprise, lots of common server software does not have great documentation. Sometimes the blogs and the online forums are the best thing you've got. Internal documentation is what we in our own organizations know about how our own process works. There's a long history of ops organizations writing documentation by sysadmins for sysadmins. In larger organizations, these may be compiled by a writing team into something more structured. But that tribal knowledge that is underneath them, a lot of times really only comes hard-won and with pain from people actually doing it. In an organization whose core business is not the making of tech products, a lot of those docs are never seen outside the technology organization. A hands-on sysadmin typically has two broad categories of tasks: designing and implementing a solution, and making sure that solution keeps working. The goal is to have more of the former, with the hope of having less of the latter. But even the most smoothly running operation needs to be responsive to business requests. Somebody's always going to ask you to change something. Planning and implementation integrates and sometimes builds tools and processes. The types of questions documentation needs to answer here are often similar to those of developers. What is the syntax for this scripting language? But just as much, it's how does this package address my requirement? And does it fit in my organization's process? Can I actually use this thing and not have my security officer on my back constantly? Incident response, on the other hand, it should not involve a lot of contemplation. A ticket comes in, somebody decides how urgent it is, and then who gets to handle it? For on-call, typically the person who first responds to that ticket is only doing triage and mitigation. Root cause analysis comes later, and it may very well be done by somebody else. The critical questions to answer for incident response are, what is this? How is it affecting my system? And what is the best thing I can do about it right now? For some context about this, let me tell a little story about an enterprise software development. Somewhere in the land of enterprise software. This is Carla. She's the director of infrastructure at Talkie-Co, a mobile telecom company. Her team keeps internal services working, from email to bandwidth to call center systems. They don't directly handle the help desk issues, but they do manage the process of deploying, upgrading, and maintaining employee machines and devices. So her customer care department has been saying that subscribers are asking about the photos of adoptable cats that they ship on their branded smartphones. Some of the agents are informally passing around information as customers ask about things, but it would be really nice to have a system that could maintain a database of this information, and it would be consistent and updated and easily accessible. So she asks her database architect, Eric, to look for products that might help at the conference he's going to. I'm sure you also have a drawer full of junk that looks like this. He finds Categoria, a company with a system to manage cat-related information and share it across large organizations. See, they even have a book. How great is that? The product has a database of cats that can be adopted at shelters around the country. Eric wonders how well that works in practice, so he reads a few blogs. It seems to match the marketing material. People like it. There's a tutorial on the website, and we even have this lovely book. So he downloads the software, he requests the enterprise trial license, sales gives him a phone call, and then his first task, how do I install this thing? So at this stage, Eric is doing a high-level evaluation. He has some basic information, but he's looking for independent confirmation that this product meets his needs. The blogs say it's working for other people, and the introductory documentation from the website walks him through getting the trial working. That's good enough to move forward, and he's happy that Carla actually approves the budget. So we move on to this pilot. Eric has a meeting with the TalkieCo folks and the Categorio folks, and they sketch out what their lovely pilot will look like. They're going to set up one node for 25 agents in Thornton, Colorado, in their main call center. Back at his desk, Eric sets up housekeeping with new labels and tags in the issue tracking system. He adds a new section in the internal knowledge base and creates a wiki. The meeting notes get turned into a proper network diagram, and he writes out what kind of server he has to request to be able to do this. All of this goes on the wiki, plus whatever vendor documentation that looks useful, like the end user's information that he can later send to customer care. So issue tracking tickets aren't structured documentation, but they're still a great source of information. After issues are resolved, some of them will be made into more detailed knowledge base articles. The team wiki is more informal, like a scrapbook. Eric's wiki even has a page for random feature ideas that functions like a persistent brainstorming session. So moving on back to Eric and Categorio and TalkieCo. So Eric installs the server, and he asks his department's networking intern, Sinyi, to add it to the monitoring system. So he points her to information about the tools that they use and the standards that they have for what services get monitored for what kinds of systems. And she creates a wiki page to document what her dashboard shows, what kinds of alerts can be expected, and what sorts of things will happen when things come in. And meanwhile, Eric starts a Categorio-specific runbook. Runbooks are wonderful. This is what they do. They keep you from losing your mind. A runbook contains step-by-step instructions, and it's clear enough for the engineer on call to handle an issue without having to go hunting down additional information. You could have host names, file names, escalation criteria. If it's needed to perform the task, it's in there. Every major area of the system can have a runbook, and the tasks in them are as diverse as how to fail over a storage volume or how to handle a power outage. Some things are still important enough to print out a piece of paper and tape it to your desk. This is an example from a mission-critical, highly available service in another industry that you may have used to attend this conference. If someone has to pick up that red phone, everybody at your airport is about to have a really bad day. You might not have time to find or access an online document. Time-sensitive details have to be available when they are needed, and at the level of detail that is needed to address that issue. A good tip that I've learned is if you have a binder of procedures and one of them is what to do when the power goes out, tie a flashlight to it. And add check battery to a routine operations procedure. Very handy. So here we are, back to our cats. So the pilot is up and running, and Eric is planning a larger deployment. He has a more robust plan with test and production systems, replicas. There's a server at each call center. He evaluates the impact of this new software on the network and figures out how he's going to push client installs out to individual agent computers, puts it all together. He brings in our friend Kathy, a tech writer, to create a basic operations manual. And she starts with that knowledge base and wiki content, which is great because we compiled it somewhere, but it doesn't have a lot of structure. I am sure you have run into this problem. This is why we exist. Other things to think about is that the vendor did provide end user documentation, But because we have an audience that has a very tightly focused environment that they work in, we probably want to take that and rebuild a version with exact server names, exact host names, pictures of exact environments, so that our agents in our company can know exactly what's going on and not be reading a vendor documentation that's more generic. So now in this stage of the project, we are deep into implementation. We've got scripts to write, procedures to define. Everything needs to fit into the larger organizational standards. So Eric knows what to do by now, but less experienced staff really benefit from guides on naming schemes, test tools, test procedures, configuration management, anything else that's covered by a company standard. Hopefully there are documents about this. Clearly, some people know everything up front, but for example, our intern, Sinyi, needed to go and look up what actual monitoring system is it that we use. So having that stuff handy is definitely going to make it easier. Some of the things you might collect as part of building your documentation at this stage is the dependency list for your installed packages, any platform details, workarounds that the vendor has given you. Any of this stuff can be just completely critical later, so you want to make sure it's not lost. Everything important to operating and using this system should be recorded somewhere other than email. Oh, look, something happened. So Eric pushes out packages to the test machine and finds that one of the nodes doesn't install correctly. It seems to be something about automated versus manual install. I'm sure you've never had that problem. Category O support says because of how the network is configured, he ought to use a custom script. And he could write it himself, or he could get professional services to do it for him. Because this is a pretty big contract, it came with professional services. So Eric's like, yeah. Next problem. Now Eric has vendor-supplied customizations that have to be tracked. The script goes in the repository, and in the commit message, Eric writes up where it came from, why it was needed, and how to use it. For now, he puts a link to that on the wiki, but later it'll get incorporated into a proper install guide. So the team continues to test everything. Stuff that doesn't behave as expected are candidates for procedures in the Runbook, and you would add sample alerts, snippets from log files, images of dashboards, anything that would help quickly identify and resolve emergencies. More detailed root cause analysis goes on the wiki, or if it's appropriate, it gets turned into a knowledge base article. So we've gotten to the point where we've got a first version of a manual built on everything that the team learned through the test deployment. And isn't that lovely? We know how it works. Wonderful, beautiful. We'll get to that. So Eric schedules a call with everybody, and we go over what Category O is, the basics of what to expect from operations, and most importantly, where to find the docs. So a little about this slide. So you may or may not have known this, but United 757 entertainment systems run Linux. I have lots of pictures that look like this. So testing is going along, and now we're ready to go to production. So first we roll out to the Thornton call center, and then 2 other facilities. Eric invites everybody to lunch, we eat delivery food, and everybody has a great time. So in the process of getting to a successful production deployment, there's a lot of artifacts that are created. The team tried to anticipate as many questions and situations as they could, but there was always the understanding that a better experience with the system will bring new things to learn and document. That's just the reality. You followed the instructions. The instructions kind of more or less covered everything, sort of, and then something else happens, and well, here we are. So we're in production. Agents have cat information. Subscribers are happy. The agents really like that the initial screen shows the location of the nearest animal shelter. And that came from a suggestion that was on the brainstorming wiki page. See how handy that is? Everybody's happy, customers are happy, agents are happy, cats are happy. Look at that cute cat. So it's a holiday weekend, and call centers are in a great mood because subscribers are having fun instead of calling about bills. But Saturday afternoon, an agent in Jacksonville views a Category O cat record only to find something that isn't a cat. Come on. Yeah. So, who let the pangolin in? Within minutes, all the agents at that facility are reporting animals that are not cats. Plus, the network is being swamped by incoming requests to the Jacksonville Category O node. African rhinos, tree frogs, sea turtles, all these exotic animals that are not even remotely domestic cats. There's even, well, look. So the customer care manager is still in the process of opening the trouble ticket when the network attack generates a critical alert. Mina, the engineer on call, hands her eldest the barbecue tongs and goes back inside. She sees there's a ticket from customer care, too, and starts investigating. These not cats are new records created by client software from outside Talkico. The metadata looks correct, but what are these images? And the Jacksonville network is slow as molasses. Mina decides the best thing to do is switch Jacksonville from using its local node to the primary at corporate. The Runbook, guess what, has a procedure. She does that, she confirms the cats are back, and everything is great. Now we gotta deal with the network. That's my own photograph. The dashboard is showing the server getting hit from IP addresses everywhere, but only on the Category O port. Clients are supposed to authenticate with the server, but somehow these rogue clients are able to do that. So Mina blocks that port at the firewall, and that shuts them down temporarily. So with things stabilized, she writes up her findings in the monitoring ticket and asks Eric to actually go and investigate. Whoop, sorry, I got ahead of my joke there. So Eric looks in the logs, and he sees all these bogus clients look authenticated, but meaningless users, and all the exact same software version. That's unusual. Doesn't match any of the versions agents are actually using. Somebody's got a botnet with a cracked client, and they're creating new cat entries for some reason. So he updates the ticket with the recommendations to only allow Talkico networks. Works, great. Eric uses Mina's incident summary to compose an email for Category O support. The workaround is okay, but it really needs a bug fix. And there's still a problem with this strange stuff in the database. So support replies back, apologizing profusely for this. They already are working on something, and 2 days later, they have a server hotfix, updated client versions, and a script to clean up the database. Wonderful. So Eric documents all this stuff. The script goes in the repository just like before. Everything is fixed, it's beautiful. And now he has a brand new Runbook procedure for removing malicious records from the database. Everything's lovely, there we go. Much of the information Eric referenced as part of this came from stuff already written down, like the version numbers of the client software. That was from a manifest used by the configuration management system. And there was a copy of it on the wiki, so he could immediately find it. Not every organization will have all of these parts, and some may have more. Large companies who have been running the same software for decades often have reams and reams of internal documentation. Occasionally for systems that have been long since abandoned by their vendors. So despite much efforts to build easily managed and self-preparing systems, system administration is still a very interrupt-driven thing. The best documentation provides someone with what they need to know at the right level and in the right context. Integrating a new thing requires a lot of upfront learning, so different people learn in different ways. Some prefer tutorials and cookbooks, others theory. One common frustration I hear from my sysadmin friends is that there might be a bunch of beginner stuff, and there might even be a few, high-level, super expert detail things, but there's not a lot in the middle. And a lot of how to make it actually work kind of lives in that middle land of, I'm beyond hello world, but I really don't need the white paper. So incident response relies heavily on team-produced documentation. Sometimes it only exists because the person who knew it wasn't in that day, and it didn't go well. Details can depend a lot on local practices, and sometimes these procedures can contain confidential information. So it's important to have your own versions of these things. So in closing, system administration is really still a little bit of an ad hoc thing, but far less than it used to be. Ops teams that burn out their people tend to take their companies down with them, and nobody likes that. People who do budgets don't really like to hear that it took longer than we thought to fix that. But there are still physical devices and services that you don't control. Things happen. Planning to manage is good. Planning for when you can't manage is necessary. The documentation used and created by sysadmins reflect this reality. So thank you for joining me on this tour, and I hope that this provides some insight into what ops organizations do in the world that we live in. And if you're wondering what a flipbook is, this is from a NASA project, and a flipbook is a book with the animation frames written on the pages, so you can just sort of run your hand over it, and it will animate for you like this. And it's kind of fun. Thank you very much.